Good morning. This is the Blaine's World podcast that can be found each week on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. You can also listen in on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And you can find more information about our other shows, as well as this one, at our website, www.blainesworld.net. I'm your host, Blaine Greenfield, and I'm here in my Zoom studio in lovely downtown Fairview, North Carolina. And each week we focus on positive news and information about people and organizations in both Western North Carolina and throughout the country. And toward that end, it's my pleasure to introduce our two guests, and they are Joe and Mary Standaert, who are local historians and vintage postcard collectors. And guys, you can feel free to wave to all your fans and friends who are watching this. So if you're watching this, that's Joe and Mary, and you can say hello to everybody. And I should mention that these two folks have collected postcards of Buncombe County since 1987, with a collection of over 4,000 vintage cards, all dating back to the early 1900s. Since moving to this area full-time in 2006, they've used their cards to share local history through talks to civic groups and churches. They also teach a 6-week course for the McCall Lifelong Learning Program. The couple is very involved in community activities and volunteering, and also enjoy hosting hiking treks in the Shenandoah Valley. And so the first question I ask both of you is that as children, you grew up where?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. You grew up as children. Where do you guys grow up?
Our long short story is that I grew up in South Carolina and Joe grew up in New Jersey, and we met as summer science students at Oak Ridge, Tennessee, when we were juniors in college. We had been married 54 years.
Okay. By the way, I'm from New Jersey also. So where in Jersey, Joe?
Hawthorne, North Jersey.
Okay, yeah, I'm from Central Jersey. My wife was from North Jersey. So you met as students, and at what time did you start collecting postcards?
We moved to Florida for our working career, and we came up to Montreat and for a music and worship conference. And I'm Presbyterian. I learned the term cradle Presbyterian once I came up here. And basically, we came for a worship and music conference in 1983 and bought a lot in Montreat, the very first week we were ever here. Then we built a house in 92 and moved up in 2006. But our entry into the postcards there were very few histories at that point in time. And we were at the Montreat post office. We don't have any postal delivery here in Montreat. You have to go to the post office to pick up your mail. And there was an index card saying, looking for vintage postcards. And we said, oh, that sounds like a lot of fun. And we wanted to learn more about the area. So that was the start of our card collection in 1987.
Do you still have that first postcard?
Well, yeah, we've got them all.
We have them all. But I couldn't tell you which was the first one, but I distinctly remember the index card that was put up by our town manager at the time, Ron Nally. We give him full credit for getting us started, which probably, maybe he wished he never did. We became competitors for the cards. Collectors become competitive fairly quickly.
He had his own collection of Montreat cards.
Okay, well, now that's interesting because I didn't know this, Joe, that are there postcards, like I never heard this before, for every city out there, or just this Montreat thing?
Well, no. Postcards were really popular turn of the century, even to today. And if you go to like postcard, we used to do postcard shows down in Florida where the whole convention center would be filled up with tables and tables and tables of postcards. But people who collect postcards do one of two ways. They collect either topics like circus, railroad, you name it, or they do what's called views, where they have it boxes and boxes by each state in each city. So you can go to one of these postcard shows and pull out the North Carolina box and pull out the Black Mountain section, and people collect views. But there's millions and millions of postcards that were done.
Now, are you two folks the only ones who specialize, though, on Montreat, or are there other people who specialize on Montreat?
Well, Ron Nally, our previous town manager, used to specialize in Montreat. And we pretty much are about the only ones specializing in Montreat, but we've now branched out into Black Mountain and the entire Shenandoah Valley. So we did a second book on the whole Shenandoah Valley with postcards from each town in the valley. So
now you have these 4,000 cards. Where are they stored?
Oh, they're in our closet. one thing about collecting postcards that you can put them in notebooks, and you have special sleeves that'll hold 4 postcards each. So we have probably 12 to 15 feet in our closet that are nothing but bound.
So basically 3-ring binders.
3-ring binders. So they're easy to collect and small. But you had asked why so many postcards, and we have over 800 just of Montreat, all unique. And then as time grew and we moved here, we started collecting Swannanoa Valley. And then during COVID, we moved into collecting Asheville cards, which became the Buncombe County name game book. But why are there so many cards? It's because if Asheville has such rich history, Asheville became a mecca for tourists. 20 to 30,000 people a year, just visitors coming in the 1900s, just as the Vanderbilts were coming, the Groves, E.W. Grove was coming, and there were postcard publishers at that point in time. So it was the golden age of postcards, and Asheville was at the epicenter with George Massa and H.W. Pelton, and people coming and wanting to send a, quote, email of the day, a postcard back home.
Well, let me ask you. Yeah, I'm sorry, Joe.
It was like the text message of the day. And the post office made it really cheap, like a penny to mail one of these things.
Well, so those cards then, which is probably interesting. So they all have the fronts of the cards, but their messages on the back of all of them?
It varies. You'd be surprised how many don't have messages, because think of the ones you've bought yourself that you probably buy and never send, or you've got stuck in a drawer someplace, or you use them as a bookmark for things that you've done. So it was just during the early 1900s, especially, there were hundreds of millions of cards mailed in the United States, over 700 million cards mailed in the United States when the population was only 100 million. So you can see why there's so many. And now we really don't collect the cards anymore because we have so many. They have to tell a story. They're not just pictures. The best postcards are the ones that are puzzles and tell a story, who they are and what they show about what's going on.
And the way we got into history and writing history books on Montreat in the Valley is that when we started collecting the postcards, especially of Montreat, we started seeing postcard images of here's a big white wooden hotel that's no longer here. Where was it? What was it for? So the postcards led us into a whole lot of questions about the area, about where were these things, where were these buildings, where were these hotels, which then got us into learning the history of the area.
Well, let me ask you, Joe, then the postcards we're talking about, are they still published? Does anybody still publish these postcards?
Oh, yeah.
I found, from my standpoint, one of the reasons the collection has grown over the years, cards that we bought that were new in 1987 are now vintage cards. And so we've always collected them as they come out. But we took a trip fairly recently and we're looking for postcards. I think postcards are becoming a thing of the past. They're harder to find. And that makes sense as well, because now you have your cell phone. So you just take a picture and you text messages. But postcards, people don't buy and they don't send anymore.
You're saying that so true, Mary. I'm trying to think out loud. The last time I got a postcard, I don't even remember. It's so long. Even though I realize, it's funny, Joe, you said it like that. I still have postcards in my drawer here, but I haven't used them for 10 years. So it's just people don't send them anymore. It's a shame.
And you can't quite bring yourself to throw them away. They don't take up much space, and so people just. But one of the interesting things we find, and it's rather sad, is when we're in an antique store and you're looking around and you're a collector, is to find someone's family's entire collection on sale. And that sort of makes us sad to see that being lost. End up in a garage sale or just like seeing someone's diploma.
Well, one of the things you mentioned I find very interesting is that, so you collected these postcards, but for purposes of telling a story. And I guess, what is it? They tell the story of Montreat? Is that the idea behind it?
We've taught courses on Montreat history. We've taught a 6-week course, adult education, on the history of the entire Swannanoa Valley. I've used postcards to teach a course on Mount Mitchell Railroad, on the railroad up from Old Fort. You name it, you can use the postcards to illustrate whatever topic of history in this area that you want to do. And the postcards are beautiful because they were done turn of the century, and you see buildings and you see colorized postcards of places that don't exist anymore. So the postcards really tell the old history of the town, and you can use them to illustrate. And the books we wrote as good histories of Montreat and the Swanhaven Valley, which could be read almost without the postcards.
Well,
because
and you were,
we tried to do a good history.
and if I can have you maybe talk a little bit about that, because what I gathered then, so you collected the postcards, then you eventually put them together in a book. Was that the process?
Oh, no.
What?
The fun is in the finding and the sharing, but even the most recent book on the Buncombe County name game, it was never meant to be a book. It was meant to be a COVID project. And this is, when you're ready, Joe can pull up a bit about it. But we collected them to learn the history. And once you start realizing that many of the people, these are real scenes, these are not models. And so you could actually start recognizing the people in the postcard. You go, oh, wow, that's, Mary Martin Miller. And she's wearing the same dress that she wore in this other picture over here. And you see, I love the pictures that were taken of Pack Square around the turn of the century, the trolleys. But back to the Buncombe County name game, which is the most recent book. It started out as a way to connect people. It started out during COVID, the first day of spring, March 19th, 2020. And I sat down and wrote the first post online. And I have no idea who's on my email distribution list. It was just random. I wanted something that people could get and share with others, because I noticed that we were all losing a sense of time, a sense of place, and where we were. So when the COVID project began, I always made sure I put the date, the day of the week, where we were in the COVID process. And I did that every time, just so that you knew it was a Saturday. And then I would send it out to my distribution list. The idea was that they could then send it on to people that they knew, rather than there just being another poem, another meme, or another. And the format, which evolved after about 10 posts, was I would have heading, and again, the COVID information. And then I would write 170-word post. Just think of it as a podcast in words.
Well, that's what it sounds like. But let me
Never
ask you,
more than 170 words.
what, it's almost, I guess it's close to Mary. It's almost like, the people texting people, the 170 words, very limited. And so did you do that every day, or you sat down and write it?
The first 100 days, I did it every day.
So you had 100.
It would take me 10 to 12 hours of work to finally get it in the final shape, because it wasn't what I call a thus and such book. Here's a picture of a building. It has so many windows, and this is where Aunt Sally lives. But the text could be independent of the card. But people love seeing the visual images as well, which were associated with the cards. But every single 100, no more than 170 words. That's all people want to read these days.
For sure. Did it become easier for you as you got into it?
Well, no, because we started out with knowing Montreat and Black Mountain and Swanhaven Valley, but then she got into Asheville history, which we didn't really know a whole lot about. So a lot of our research was a learning curve for us, learning a lot more about Asheville and Asheville postcards that we never did before.
And Joe, if I can ask you, because I think it's really cool if you can kind of show what Mary's talking about, that this is, I guess, what you're going to show as part of this latest book you wrote. Is that correct?
Right. Like I said, it was done as an online post, an online Facebook, and was only after a year when she quit that we ended up scanning them in and putting them in a hard copy book format. But they were out every day as a blog, basically.
I think it came out beautifully. Could you show a little bit of this, Joe?
You ready? You ready?
Yep.
Oops, wrong screen. Never mind. Hang on.
Well, as we're setting this up, I should mention that we're speaking to Mary and Joe Standaert, who are local historians and vintage postcard collectors. And we're going to be trying to show this on the air in just a little bit. But people listening, this is what they're going to be hearing about, how these two folks did this, took this postcard collection and then ran with it. And it became this just the fourth book we have. And Joe, are we going to be able to get it, or?
Can you see it?
Yeah, no, all I see is the
Oh,
a webcam, picture of a webcam. There you go. Okay, now back to you. We had it before, but we will get this.
How's that?
There you go. Perfect. Okay. So Joe, describe then what we're looking at.
I'll do this.
Okay, Mary, please. Yeah.
As you say, it's a Buncombe County name game. It's got a heading. It's post 21, April 8th, 2020 by me. And it's the 21st day of spring. We need to know where we are. The 25th day of social distancing, and the 14th day of the stay home and stay safe. So I hope you can recognize this particular image, this postcard. This is the entrance to Biltmore Estate, and it was built with Raphael Guastavino, and this is where in 1792 Buncombe County was founded in 1792. And of that huge county at the time, there were more than 11 counties cut out of the original Buncombe County. It was the state of Buncombe. So that's one card.
Now, let me just stop you a second. So people are looking at it, which is really cool, the description, but they're also looking at a beautiful card. And so that was just the front of the postcard. Was that it? What we're looking at?
That's the card.
And now on the back of it, if somebody wanted to, they could have mailed this out. They could put a stamp on it and written something on the back.
Right, correct.
Okay. And by the way, I guess if they wanted to, it'd be a shame to dismantle your collection. But these postcards you all have, unless there was something written on the back or a stamp, they're all usable. Is that correct?
Oh, you could use them today for sure.
We use them to send friends duplicate cards. We'll send them a postcard, 1940 postcard.
Okay. No, very cool. Great. So this is one picture. Joe, if you turn to the next one, I'll have Mary describe it.
This is Land of Sky, and who Edward Buncombe was, whom the county was named after. In 1792, he was a Revolutionary War hero, and William Davidson and many of the men there in 1792 had fought with him, and he never came to Asheville. And this is above the clouds in the land of the sky.
Now, before you started writing this, Joe and Mary, did you see yourself as historians, or what got you into becoming these historians?
We were both trained as scientists. I was a research scientist at the VA hospital in Tampa studying diabetes, and Joe started out in science and went into IT. But after we did our first book on the history of Montreat using our postcards, a friend of ours pointed out that historians and research scientists are much alike, which I didn't realize at the time, but it's so true, that both scientists and historians collect facts, and then they make a story. The stories can change over the time as the data changes and as the facts change, but the way the mind works in putting it together, getting data, and then writing a story. So it makes sense. We never set out to be historians, but it's a good fit for us. And one of the things that we feel really good about now, since we weren't born in this area, New Jersey and South Carolina, and 30 years of working in Florida, is when our friends now who were born here refer to us as not just historic, but local historians. So we're very pleased, and we love to share the information. And there's so many people who have moved to Western North Carolina who are hungry for the history. It makes you feel like you belong.
Talk, if you would, about the process in terms of if somebody's listening and they may be from another area. If they want to do something similar in that area, there were two parts to this. It seems like you had to get the postcards. And by the way, the quality is beautiful. They were each picture is as clear as this picture. They're absolutely great. But how do you go about researching the history? Or that was another part of this, that you had the postcard. How do you do the research of the history?
Well, it's normal history research. We got every book we could find on Montreat history originally. And then we probably got 2 bookshelves full of local North Carolina, Buncombe County, Swannanoa Valley history books. So there's a lot of history books out there you can glean information from. I'm also on the board with the Swannanoa Valley History Museum in Black Mountain. So we do a lot of history hikes and history talks for the museum. But you gradually learn it, and you gradually talk to the local people that have been here for 8 generations, and you can pick up the history. But there's a lot of resources.
Okay.
In terms of other people doing it for other areas, as I mentioned, Buncombe County, Asheville, Montreat, Blue Ridge, Assembly, Ridgecrest, it's a place where people came, and it has tremendous amount of history here. And we have the postcards. If I were in a small town, like my hometown of Abbeville, South Carolina, or Greenwood, I mean, you have to be in an area where it has to be a tourist destination for there to be a large number of cards to be available. For instance, Charleston, South Carolina would be a perfect place to collect cards and do a similar type of thing, because it's got a lot of history and a lot of people went there and a lot of cards. But, you know, you can certainly even just walk into an antique store here anytime, and you're out and about, and you'll likely find a card that will interest you. And they're not that expensive. They can get expensive when you start getting into the rare cards, but and there's a market out there. But when we did our very first book on Montreat in 2008, we had to truly go to the primary resources. We would go down to the Pack Library, and we'd also go into looking at the original newspaper articles and just flipping through. But technology has changed so much. By the time we did the Swannanoa Valley book in 2011, you could go online. And I have to say, you just sort of type it in and go hit the button and go and search. But then you just had to be careful that they were as correct as possible, because you can get led down a bunny trail real easily with misinformation on the internet. But there's just a lot of information out there. And now that they've digitized so many newspapers, and that's just been within the last couple of years, you can find out tremendous amount of information from those. So it's changed just as the world has changed with internets and search engines and things here.
By the way, I love this one. As you're talking, I'm reading into it. And it's so cool, the history you bring into this. And maybe just talk a little bit about this one. It's fascinating about the 2 sisters from China.
Yes. This is Mrs. Chiang Kai-shek,
right.
And her sisters. There were 3 girls and there were 3 boys. And they came over to the States for their education. And they went to one of the conferences. The 2 girls went to the conference in Blue Ridge Assembly out here. And then they had a friend here in Montreat. So they came and visited in Montreat as well for that. This was in 1912. And these are people down here. This is probably not them, but it's emblematic of what they would have been doing there. This is the YMCA, though this is the YWCA that's actually meeting at the YMCA. And you find out all sorts of wonderful history if you're into the YWCA and the YMCA have never been part of the same organization. They were always totally separate.
What's so great about this book and these pictures is they're all so clear. You know, I can't believe, like this postcard, with that one you just showed was probably how many years old?
Oh, yeah.
This is your social distancing.
And this was on social distancing. And then it was really great fun going into the Asheville world, which we didn't know. But I mean, isn't that just a beautiful postcard of the social distancing comment that I made?
And I can't believe it's from 1905. You know, that's how it looked. So that monument, guys, was up for that. Well, when was it built originally?
It was built around in the late 1896 in that particular by George W. Pack. But in the background, what you're doing is you're looking, Patton Avenue would be at your back, and you're looking east down Pack Square, and that's the City Hall that was built in 1892. And you learn things like, how many city halls courthouses Asheville had?
And the answer is?
Yes. 2.
2. Okay.
That was the first one. How many county courthouses has Buncombe County had?
I'll say 2. How many?
At least 8.
Holy.
At least 8 in there. So you sort of learn these things along the way.
It's beautiful. This was Pack Square. Wow. Looks a little different today, doesn't it?
Oh, and this is, well, I'm pointing here and you can't see me. I just want to point at them. But that was torn down during the 60s and 70s when urban renewal was to the buildings to the right. The buildings to the left are pretty much still as you would see them today.
Now, a lot of these original cards, the early cards, they really didn't have a good color printing like your current color postcards. So they were all done out of black and white negatives. So a lot of these early ones were hand colored. So they were actually works of art because people actually hand colored a black and white negative. And then for a while, they used to send them all over to Germany because Germany only had the only technology to do chromolithograph where they actually could print them in color. So the earlier ones are almost like works of art that people hand colored.
Is that what happened on this one?
I don't think so.
This is a little later, so.
Okay, but I'm just saying it's beautiful. The color is just great. And again, if people are just listening to the podcast, we're speaking with Mary and Joe Standaert, and they are going through their latest book of a collection of these beautiful postcards. But what I think Mary makes it so interesting to me is the story behind each postcard. So you're not just putting a postcard, but you're actually telling a story behind it. And this one is what, folks? We just passed that one.
This is the cover of the Buncombe County name game. And as I say, it became a COVID-19 pandemic project. It was never meant to be a book. But, if you do post or you give a talk, at the end of the talk or end of the post, it's gone. And it's not permanent. So when starting it was easy, how do you end something? That's hard. When is it and how do you finish it up? So I decided that it should end exactly 1 year later. And on occasion, I still write a few posts. And at that point in time, Joe said, why don't we put all of your posts into a book form? So he rescanned them at high resolution and in color. And then we send off that to a company in California. They send them back to us. And then we actually physically bind and punch the holes for the book because it's expensive to have them printed in color, but it's the color that makes them really special to do.
Let me ask you both a question in terms of these postcards and eventual books. Do you have a preference as to putting these together or to teaching and explaining the history? Do you have a preference as to what you like doing better? Teaching about it or writing about it?
They're one and the same process. You prepare. Once you've got it, you go through the same processes to do it. I've found that what people like to hear, people like to see, are things that they know. So PowerPoint presentations, which allowed us to share them by speaking. But as I was going, I became the queen of the 170-word novel in the midst of all of this. When we did our first book back in 2008, you only had a 70-word allowance. Those are hard to write, to tell a story in 70 words, but 170, you can, as I said, you can write a novel in 170 words.
The first 2 books were done by Arcadia Publishing.
Right.
See them on, in all counters all over the place. But we did 2 postcard histories, and they have their rigid format. So each page had like 2 postcards, which your caption had to be 70 words. But we were trying to do an accurate history, not just describe the postcard. So trying to do an accurate history in 70 words got to be a little difficult.
What do you see? What do you see as your next project after this? So we have these boxes of postcards. We have 4 books we put out about these using these postcards, do you have a fifth project in mind or a next project in mind?
No,
Resting up from doing these projects.
we've got a lot of presentations where we do, oral presentations of it.
Giving it, somehow they seem to have come together, but we've done talks for Kiwanis and McCall's, Rotary clubs. An hour-long program is coming up for the Swannanoa Valley Museum on August 17th. That people can log on to the Swannanoa Valley Museum website and get tickets for that. And if they want to become a member of the Swannanoa Valley Museum, that'd be wonderful. And then you get to come for free to the
and
talk.
She did an hour presentation to the Tampa Preservation Society. So anywhere we can get the information out about history of the area is great, because people are desperate to learn more about this area, because a lot of people are new.
And even people who grew up here find out things that are new. And we sort of make it a point to put in things that people can relate to and go home. And if they remember 4 or 5 things from the talk, I never knew that. Or like, for instance, one of my favorites is, everybody knows the Grove Park Inn. Okay. Sure. But E.W. Grove, who was he and why he was here? And the fact that if you stayed at the Grove Park Inn, you had to be healthy, you had to be wealthy, you had to be quiet, and you had to be dry. They didn't serve any alcohol at the Grove Park Inn when it opened. And he was also, along with his son-in-law, Fred Seeley, very much against using convict labor, which was used to build the railroad up from Old Fort at that point in time. So who would know that? And only by doing these books and learning that and showing it, it puts things into different perspectives for a lot of people.
Now, are postcard publishers still publishing postcards to this day, or do they come out with new postcards?
Yes. Yes.
So if you want one, for example, Joe, for downtown Asheville, you get there's a collection of postcards on downtown Asheville.
Right. You usually see them on the counter near the cash register or whatever, or in bookstores or anywhere. They're getting less and less, probably. But
if folks want to get this book, for example, What's in a Name Game, Mary, what's the best bet to get a copy of this?
Probably, since the only place to get them is from Joe and I, is the email is mjmontreat@charter.net.
Okay, let me just repeat that. What was it?
mjmontreat@charter.net.
Okay, great.
There it is, right there.
MJ Montreat. Okay, let me ask you this: is the you mentioned they could order directly here? Do you have a website on any of this information, or is it available anywhere?
Yeah, we've got I don't know where it is. I've got a website with that information, but.
And while Joe's looking for that, one of the things that I was taught early on, I did another book on the Montreat Gate Boy, but I always make sure on our books that we have a Library of Congress number. So that means it'll be preserved forever. And then we have donated copies of the book to various libraries and things around the way, in addition to selling them. But
by the way, impressive at the very top, I see, and talk about this. So this particular book won an award. It was in 2021. What was that award?
That was the Griffin Award from the Asheville and Buncombe County Preservation Society. It was the Griffin Award for Education.
Very nice. And then you told me off the air, you said there's another event coming up. Or is that the one we mentioned already? You said in
given a couple of talks, but several things that have arisen from doing the book and collecting the postcard. It connects you with people. And one of my best friends, I have never met her, and I don't expect that I ever will. Her name is Mary Othello Burnett. She's 92 years old, and she lives now in Michigan, but she grew up in Black Mountain. And a few years ago, she published a book talking about her experiences as a Black child growing up in the community of Black Mountain. And she mentioned in her book that she went to the Allen School. And everybody knows about the YMI, but not so many know about the Allen School. So she and I made an application for a North Carolina historical highway marker to be installed. And it took about a year for that to be documented by us and then approved. And on October 21st at 2:00 in the afternoon, down in front of the Deed of Register's office is going to be an unveiling. And everyone is invited, especially the alumni. I know some of the city council people are coming, and Drew is coming, Drew Reisinger. And then, so we'll have the unveiling of that marker, which means it's forever will be remembered. It was a private school run by the Methodist Church for a Black, female, and college prep. I mean, an amazing time from 1887 to 1974. Nina Simone graduated there in 1950, just to put it in context. And Mary Othello was a classmate of Nina Simone's. And she remembers all of these things like yesterday. And so, and then after the event on the 21st, which we'd love everybody to come, and we're going to have a reception over at the TDA, Tourist Development Authority, or Explore Asheville, at their offices, because that's the original site, and they're in the original buildings of the Allen School. So it's part of what the book led to unexpectedly into a long-lasting thing. Okay.
And again, best bet, if folks want to find more about that, you gave your email address. Joe, were you able to dig up the website, or is your website somewhere?
I brought it up.
Thank you.
I just closed it. This is this little one web page that's got the book.
Up top there, I can read it.
Okay, there you go. mjmontreat.com.
Yeah.
/namegame.htm.
So if we want
how to order it, email, price, and a sample of a couple pages of the book.
Beautiful. Just looking at it is fantastic. But let me ask you folks one last question. And I want to thank you for the fact that not only are you involved in this project, the history project, but I'll say in your spare time, Joe, you and I were talking about it, and I'll ask Mary this as well. You're also active in the community in other ways as well. And just give a little bit of, Joe, what else you do aside from this project? What are some of the other things you're involved in?
Well, me personally, I just finished doing the president of the Western North Carolina Botanical Club, which you may wonder what a botanical club is. So it's actually a group of people, most of them from Hendersonville, Brevard, but we go out on weekly walks around the area, identifying wildflowers and looking at different trails. The club has been in existence for 50 years. And we've got over 100 sites that we've documented all the wildflowers and plants up and down the parkway. So it's an interesting educational site, and we've got a really good website that you can identify plants and whatever. So.
And that website is what, please?
You can just Google Western Carolina Botanical Club.
Okay, and you'll find out what's really nice about that one. So they not only learn about the plants, but they'll also get some exercise at the same time too, right? With the walks and the hikes.
Oh yeah. I'm also on the board and the head of the hike committee for the Swananoa Valley Museum and History Center in Black Mountain. And we started maybe 15 years ago going to the museum director and say, we'd like to do a hike. And the museum director said, what are you talking about? This is a museum. Why do you want to do a hike? We've been doing hikes now for 13, 15 years. We do a series of hikes called the Rim Explorer series. We're an 11 monthly hikes, pretty strenuous. We hike the rim of the entire Swananoa Valley. And in each segment, we have local historians. So we'll have somebody that's 9th generation from North Fork Valley. We have somebody else that's a direct descendant of Samuel Davidson, who was the original settler of the valley in 1784. So we have local historians that lead each of these hikes, and it's not about the hiking, it's about the history. So we do history of, Black Mountains, Montreat, whatever. And then we do another one where we do a short hike for sort of a non-hiker we do one in each community in the valley. So we do 8 hikes, one in Swannanoa, one in Black Mountain. So it's all about the history. But we go outside and people actually live the history because they're out there on top of the mountain looking at it.
Listening to you reminds me of something my wife says, and that is the fact that in another life, I used to be a college teacher, and I've since retired from that. And she says, I'm now busier than when I work full time. It seems like the two of you keep pretty busy with these various projects. And Mary, I'll ask you the same question. Aside from writing you're done with the writing 170 words every day for a year. What else are you working on, or are you involved in anything else you care to share?
Well, right at the moment, preparing talks it takes a lot of time to put together a talk, especially when you've got 4,000 cards. And then we just recently put a selection of our Asheville postcards up in the First Presbyterian Church in Asheville, of our Asheville cards, and have shared those with various members, and that'll be up through August. Other things, ebbing and flowing as life ebbs and flows, but did the rim hikes, which take a long, Joe's done them 10 times around. I've done them 3 times around, and those are pretty strenuous and fun. That is a fundraiser, just so that you know that, or your group that's listening. That
those are paid hikes.
They're paid hikes for the museum, but it sure beats a dinner, and people love that, and it builds community as people come in and you hike with the same group of people for a year or two, and you're able to say hello in the grocery store, which is a big thing when you're coming into a new community.
And the other nice thing I imagine is you also get your exercise aside from these hikes, is moving these 4,000 cards around, taking them down and putting them up. I imagine a little strenuous at times. Anyway, guys, I'd like to thank you both for being my guests on this edition of Blaine's World podcast. I'd also like to thank my producer, Cappy Tassetti. And Joe, one last time, if you would please just give me that website or contact information if they want to get in touch with you.
Yes, MJ Montreat at charter.net. That'll be the easiest way, just email.
Okay, and I'd like to thank you both for joining me on this podcast. I'll say goodbye to you, but hopefully we'll be able to sign off, and I'll be able to wrap up with you after we sign off. So thanks, folks, for being my guest.
It's a pleasure.